Welcome back to the popcorn field, everybody, for episode 4. A lot has happened since we side dressed this in episode 3, where it was maybe this tall, knee-high-ish. Now we got plants with all their parts. We're going to look at the parts. We're pollinating. We got a lot of things going on right now. Going to be some pretty cool stuff to look at, so let's get to it. The main parts of the plant I want to talk about that are out now and easy to see are the tassel. I'll grab this short one here. So the tassel is the male part of the plant. That's where the pollen comes from. Most of the pollen has fallen out of this. If we look at some leaves here, I'll just pull this one off so you can see. So those yellow specks, that's all pollen grains. That's all grains of pollen that has fallen off and is on the leaves. And popcorn has a lot of pollen. And when I mean a lot, I mean we talk about like 10 times as much as a regular corn plant. I've got a couple tassels here to show you. So if you look, this is a regular corn plant, regular field corn, dent corn, or even like our waxy corn. That's a pretty typical tassel off of a corn plant. This is a popcorn tassel, which is much, much larger. This is a good way I tell people you can maybe spot a popcorn field. Now, popcorn is like 1% of all corn acres in the US. I think that's about right for sweet corn too. And I don't know that I've ever actually seen a large size commercial sweet corn field, but we got some sweet corn over here on the other side of the yard we can look at later and take a look at it. But I tell people, if you want to spot a popcorn field, look for the tassels now this time of year in the middle of summer. These guys are big. Small dent corn, field corn tassel, big popcorn tassel. They have like 10 times as much pollen. I've actually been told having a popcorn field next to a field that is in seed corn production is a big no-no because there's so much popcorn pollen in the air. Now, people often ask, because I've got dent corn just right across the road here, 100 feet from me, from the popcorn. Is that a problem with the popcorn? No, because, and I can't tell you quite what the mechanism is, but pretty much all commercially grown popcorn, like we have here, that's contracted with larger companies, it is known as dent sterile. So this cannot pollinate my popcorn. It's not going to be a problem where we're going to have, some kind of weird hybrid of dent corn kernels and popcorn kernels that'll be no good at harvest. So that's just not a problem. We have popcorn and corn right next to each other, literally within a few feet sometimes, or sometimes we end up splitting a field for some reason. We had one last year. I got row of popcorn, next row is dent corn. Not a big deal, no problem. Another main thing I want to show you right now is the silk. I think everybody knows the silk because, that's like the hairy stuff you take out of your sweet corn. All corn has silks. What is the purpose of the silk? So we said the tassel was the male part of the plant. Well, the silk and the ear, that is the female part of the plant. So that silk may be annoying when you're trying to, shuck sweet corn, or maybe you got some silk on the stuff that you bought. But these are basically tubes that catch the grains of pollen, and the grains of pollen will travel down these to the ear. So you've got an ovule in there, female part. So every silk is a potential kernel. So you want pollination to go really well. And for us this year, I really think it is. We have gotten rain. In the last video, we were kind of short on rain, but now we have had a fair amount of rain, and it looks like it's going to rain again today. Temperatures cooled off a little bit last week in the 80s more than the 90s. We're going to be hot again this week, but we're in this field pretty much done with pollination, and the other popcorn field's 4 days older than this one, so I am sure it is done. We talked about in the last video about the time we were side dressing, that was the stage where corn was getting to the point where it was going to make a decision how many kernels it was going to have. So it does a cell division, so there's always an even number of kernels on a pod.
Did I really just say kernels on a pod?
I know it's not a pod. That's soybeans. It's a corn cob or an ear. The joke is, the running corn farmer joke is, you send somebody out in a field, tell them to find a cob of corn and count around how many vertical rows of kernels there are. Tell them you'll give them $1 if they bring you back one with odd rows on it. So because it does that cell division, it's always an even number. It does that one division. Back then, in the last video, we were setting maximum amount of kernels. Now we want maximum amount of those pollinated, and we have had really good conditions for that. So that is good. We just need rain and not crazy hot weather to finish out these last 2 months until harvest. Now let's see if I can get a good example of what the ears look right now. I got a really cool picture of popcorn the other day. These are a little farther along. Let's see if I can repeat it here. You find a decent looking ear. Let's take this one back here. Rip that one off there. So again, you got the silks, you got the husk leaves here. So the ear is inside here, and I can it's not very formed yet. Popcorn is a skinnier cob, but this one is not fully there yet. So let's peel this apart carefully. Maybe I can show you that silk to kernel thought, get a visual on it. Really careful here. There we go. Look at that. So you can hang that down. Some of them are starting to fall off, which means they have pollinated. That's when they break off. They've pollinated and kind of done their thing. But look how long those are. That's pretty cool. It's, you know, kind of like hair, like spaghetti or something. But yeah, each one of these strands, each one of these silks, if they had a grain of pollen go down and get to the ear, then they pollinated. Let's pull this off so we can look at the ear better. Not much to see just yet. So these will start maybe like right there. I don't even know if you can see that, just barely. It's called blister, and it looks like a blister on your skin. That's where the kernel is initially starting to form. So we'll go through several stages. We'll go through blister, and as the kernels get bigger and start to form, when they're nice and, you know, kind of juicy and plump, you can press on them and, you know, white fluid will come out. That is the milk stage, obviously. So we're kind of naming things for what they look like. We got blister and milk, and as that starch starts to build up and that liquid area begins to solidify, we call that dough. And, you know, it's kind of like dough for making bread a little bit. Wheat goes through that stuff too. So your sweet corn, you are picking it somewhere in that time frame. I'm not the sweet corn picking expert, but your corn, sweet corn, is still juicy because you haven't let it start to harden. Like when we harvest our dent corn and popcorn, this stuff is going to be really hard. And we should mention that too, the kernel being hard. The outside of the kernel, the pericarp, when that forms, that is the reason popcorn pops. It is thicker and stronger than normal corn. So when you heat it up, the moisture inside, we need to harvest at 14 to 17% moisture for the company we grow for. That's when they want the popcorn delivered. So when we get down in the low 17s, we'll be getting ready to go with popcorn harvest. But anyway, that pericarp is thicker and harder, like 4 times thicker, something like that, on popcorn compared to regular corn. What does that mean? That means when you heat it, it can hold that pressure from the moisture expanding inside. And when it finally gives up, popcorn turns inside out. You got popcorn to snack on. Now let's talk about the leaves, how we can maybe spot a popcorn field by the tassels. Maybe we can do that by the leaves too. So we're looking straight down the road from my house. Popcorn is on your left here, close up to us. See those leaves are droopy? They're all droopy. They're kind of hanging down, sagging over. That's kind of a sign of popcorn. Your sweet corn might look like that too. Your older varieties, like heirloom varieties, stuff like that, they're going to have droopy leaves. Now let's go across the road to my neighbor's corn and look at a modern corn plant. Hopefully this is a good view for you for the neighbor's corn. So now the neighbor's corn is on the left. My popcorn is on the right. If you can see those leaves, see they're much more upright, especially the upper leaves. They're really going almost straight up. Even the lower leaves, they do droop a little, but they don't bend down really towards the ground like the popcorn does. The idea of that is sunlight capture. And a lot of people are saying in the future, the new corn plant of the future, as we maybe narrow row spacing and increase populations per acre, that maybe you're going to have a droopy leaf down low like popcorn and keep the upright leaves on top. And maybe it's going to be kind of a Christmas tree shape. The idea of that is if we can re-droop, is that a word? If we can kind of re-droop the lower leaves and keep the upright upper leaves, so the space between the row will be covered by the droopy leaves. So kind of what we want to see is no sunlight hitting the ground during the day, because if the ground is all shaded, one, that's keeping it cooler and we're retaining moisture, and two, we know we are capturing all that free solar energy. We don't have a lot of free inputs, but the sun is one of them, and we want to capture as much of that as possible and convert that into carbon and plant growth. So here's my little sweet corn patch, just 2 rows along the yard. So the 3rd row is popcorn. See, their tassels are a little different. They've got droopy leaves. The sweet corn is not quite ready. I pulled that one off a little bit earlier. So they've got a little bit ways to go. And we talk about that 10x amount of pollen on popcorn. Careful if you got allergies here. Look at all that extra pollen on these leaves here. It's everywhere, not just the big parts there. You can see the actual pollen grains on that leaf. They are everywhere. You can see stuff getting tangled up in the silks from the tassels, from the anthers, and then we got the pollen grains. And you will notice, let me get this leaf out of the way. This plant has 2 ears. This plant has 2 ears. A lot of times with the populations we're planting today and the way things are bred, 1 ear is pretty normal. 2 ears is maybe a little more common in popcorn. We have grown one variety. This is actually a new variety for us this year. We've grown one that's supposed to throw 2 ears, or it can throw 2 ears. I've had years where it threw 2 ears is the same yield as 1 ear, because the 1 ear was much bigger when I decided to only put on 1 ear. But in theory, a corn plant, so you can see the leaf collar here, right here. That's the node on the stalk. See, there's more pollen in there. There. So you can see the node, kind of that line right there. In theory, you can put on an ear at every node of the corn plant. So you could grow that much. You get a little bit of wind. Is that plant going to stand up? Probably not. So 1 ear is the way things are bred, especially when we're planting at today's higher populations compared to, 20, 30 years ago. And since we're talking about wind damage, the last storm we had come through was from the east, and there was a big wind gust ahead of it. Didn't affect things too much, but on the outside rows, it leaned some stuff over. So you can see, you can see these 2 here. They're what I call goosenecked, so they got leaned over and they have straightened back up. It's really just the outside rows. It wasn't a big event, but yeah, that's not something we want to see on a wide scale, especially as these plants start to mature and dry down and the ears get heavier, especially with popcorn, because the stalk is not near as big as field corn. Wind damage can be an issue. And look again. Look at all that pollen. It's everywhere. And don't forget, if all goes according to plan, we are still running the time lapse way up there now. We were at ground level after planting. We were here, about chest high for a while. And as the corn got taller, we moved up the boards. Now the camera is up at the top, looking out over most of the popcorn field. So hopefully everything's going good in the camera there. We're gonna have an awesome time-lapse video of the entire season when this series is all done. Okay, now it's getting pretty windy and it might actually rain, but I was going to show you, see how the leaves alternate? They actually act like a funnel for rainwater to move the rainwater to the roots. And the rain definitely showed up. And it is windy. I would need to look at the west side of my field. But the neighbor's corn, it's flopping around, but I don't think it's getting bent. Hopefully we just get a burst of wind ahead of the front and then some nice rain after that. But I'll take the rain, it's fine. Going into the end of July, August, rain makes grain, as long as it doesn't drown us.